All right. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us all here today. Today's Shiur should be Le'ilum Nishmas, our dear friend Menachem ben Yisrael Yaakov, as well as my dear aunt Rivka Bas Gavriel Tzvi, and a special Le'ilum Nishmas for Dovidol's grandfather, Reb Shmuel ben Yosef Dov HaKohen, and as well as L'Refuah Shlema B'Karov Meshalem ben Sarah Rachel and L'Refuah Shlema Miriam Bas Sarah. We are on page 66 in the art scroll, for those who are following along. And we're starting Perek Shlishi, Perek Gimel. And before we go on to that, I saw an interesting piece, or a beautiful piece. And the last thing we spoke about when we, summarizing last chapter, we spoke about that we have to thank Hashem and we have to trust in the process, that even when something doesn't seem so great and maybe even something seems painful, that we have to understand that that is part of the process and part of even the healing. And he brings an example over here in the bottom in the cliff notes. He says, when somebody goes to a doctor and has a surgery, and the doctor picks up that scalpel and he's about to cut into you, do you tell him, no? Or do you understand that that is part of the process? It requires that scalpel be cut into you in order to do the surgery. And then once he completes the surgery, you thank him for cutting into you. It's the same concept, that when we go through some kind of difficulty, some trials, tribulations in our life, and that we have stuff that we kind of can't see how that's good for you, we have to understand that that's the scalpel cutting into us, metaphorically, as like in surgery, and that's what ultimately is going to bring the refuah, it's going to bring the goodness out once he's done with that surgery. Now, moving on to Perek Shlishi. Perek Shlishi is going to focus on five fundamental principles which causes a person's trust in Hashem to be complete once he becomes convinced of these principles and he internalizes them, they're absolute truth. And in the first one of these principles, he's going to recap all 7 criteria that we spoke about in last chapter. The only difference is he's going to elaborate on it a little bit more, and not in the same order as we had last chapter, but he's going to elaborate a little bit on all 7 of these criteria that we had. And so he starts like this. He says, the first principle, the first of them is that he must believe and recognize clearly his kapzus hashiva and yonim be'elehim asher his kapzam b'mi sheboitchem boy yitachin liftayach alav. That Hashem alone possesses all these 7 qualities that we spoke about in the last chapter, and that must be present in whoever is being trusted in order for it to make sense to place full trust in him. He says that when you see these 7 qualities, we know that it's all in Hashem, and you have to have all these 7 qualities. And I already mentioned these 7 qualities in the previous chapter. And I demonstrated that Hashem possesses all of them by citing a selection of different psukim that he brought that came to mind. And though I noted that it's obvious that only Hashem has those qualities, but the reason we spoke about why did he bring those different psukim for those 7 qualities, not for reference to bring proof, because he said that was logical, that all those 7 qualities in Hashem, but he said the reason for bringing those psukim is so to bring as a reference point, something to help you remember those individual qualities and how only Hashem possesses those qualities. Veheim. Now to review and elaborate on them, they are as follows. So again, today we're going to discuss the part of the 7 criteria that we already discussed, but he's going to elaborate a little bit more on them so you can understand better why it is that these 7 criteria are only on Hashem and why we need to have full bitachon in Hashem. Again, this is the first of the 5 principles as to why we must put our full bitachon in Hashem. Harishon. We spoke about Hashem's compassion. The first quality we must recognize is that Hashem has more compassion for a person than any other compassionate being. And therefore, it makes sense to trust in Hashem more than even the most compassionate person. And furthermore, he says, not only is Hashem's compassion greater than that of any other being, but other beings do not even intrinsically possess compassion. Rather, any compassion and sympathy that another human being ever shows toward him is kulam hey merach meher v'chamlasei. All stem from Hashem's compassion and sympathy. What he's saying over here is like this. We, as human beings, we don't even possess our own ownership of compassion, love, pity, all those different feelings that we have. Those are strictly from Hashem. Hashem possesses all that. And when you, as a person, show compassion or pity or anything else towards another human being, that's not you showing that. That's Hashem giving you the ability to show that. Hashem gives you some of His compassion and says, here, use it towards that individual that you're talking to right now. And so he's saying that not only is Hashem more compassionate than any other human being, but we don't even own our own compassion. Everything is from Hashem, and that belongs to Him to begin with. And he says, Kulam hem mirach mehem v'chamlasei, it all stems from Hashem. K'moshe Amar HaKasav, he says, and brings a pasuk as proof. He says, V'nosan l'cha rachmim v'rachmim herbecha. The pasuk says in Devarim, over there, specifically he's talking about a ir hanedachas, and a city of people who sinned, and they went against Hashem. And so over there, Hashem tells the Beis Din that you have to punish them. And he says, in return for carrying out this judgment against the sinners, Hashem will give you mercy. That's what the pasuk says. And be merciful to you. So what does the phrase mean? How do you see from this that he means that Hashem is the one who gives all that mercy and that he does? So he says the phrase "V'nosan lecha rachmim," he will give you mercy, does not mean that Hashem will act mercifully toward you. He says that it's conveyed by the phrase "by merciful towards you," the second part. Rather, the first part means that although this mitzvah demands that you judge a sinners without mercy, meaning because this is Ir Adach is punishing them is a really, really tough one, and they have to punish the entire city. And so the worry from the Beis Din was that if they go and carry out this decree, it's going to change their heart as being very, very hard people, heartless, people without care and love. And so Hashem promised them that if you go and carry out this decree, I'm going to put pity in you. Meaning that for the rest of your life, it doesn't mean that you're going to no longer be a person who's merciful towards others because you carried out this decree of wiping out an entire city. He's saying that, no, you will still possess that because I am the one who gives it. And you don't need to worry about that. And so we see from this pasuk that he's trying to show that it's Hashem that gives us the ability to care, to love, to have pity, and be merciful on other people. And that is the first of the seven of the criteria, and that he's going to explain. We're going to do one more today. V'hasheni, and this one is something that we spoke about the last part of the thing, and it's about knowledge that whatever ever happens to you is for your best. It's v'hasheni ki habori yis'ala lo yolmu mimenu afri te'ela sa'adam. That Hashem, He does not lack knowledge of any of the ways in which a person can benefit. He is perfectly aware of everything that is truly beneficial to a person and everything that is not beneficial to a person. And he says, the V'hadin noisin zeh, logic dictates this, mipnei shehu echad b'masav, since man is one of Hashem's creations. So he says, logically we can understand that if Hashem made us, that obviously He understands the inner workings of every single human being, and He understands what's good and what's bad for us. That's logic. And there is no one who knows all the means that can benefit or harm a created entity, whether it's a human being or an animal or an living organism. And all the mishaps that can befall it, meaning anything that can hurt this individual. And all the ways by which it can fall ill and by which it can be healed. Better than the one who created it. So we have doctors, we have all kinds of people in this world that help us, help each other, but nobody knows better what is good for you and what is bad for you other than Hashem. Why? Because Hashem is actually the one who made you. He made every living creature on this planet. And if this is true of human beings who produce some item, meaning who did not actually create anything new, in what they make. They only give an existing extrinsic form to something that's already created. What he means by this is like this. He says you have human beings, and you say, hey, you have a manufacturer who makes something, and then the label, for instance, clothing, it says the care and use of the clothing, how you care for it, how you wash it. Why? Because you trust the manufacturer. The manufacturer made this product, and so you understand that the manufacturer knows the care and use of that product. Same thing with Hashem. But he goes further and he says, the manufacturer who made this new product, say this item, what did he do? He took wool, other materials, silk, wood to make a home or whatever it is. What did he do? He took God's given living organism that Hashem created and put on this world. He just took a different form to it. Obviously, Hashem understands the different parts that are good and bad of that particular item and understands how to use that. The manufacturer merely took that product, for instance, wool, and made it into a shirt. The manufacturer didn't invent the wool. The manufacturer just makes a different form of it. And that's what he's saying. Is obviously, if the manufacturer can make something else out of it, then the one who made the product, the raw material to begin with, obviously knows the use and care of that. And going back to human beings who the manufacturer, Hashem, made us, clearly knows all the benefits and the mishaps that can befall a person. But as far as the essence and intrinsic form of an entity, they have no means or ability at all to originate anything. Meaning, like we just said, we can make something out of raw materials that we find on this earth. We can dig up the ground and get oil and gases, but we can't create the oil. We can't create those gases. We merely go and mine for them and use them in ways that we can figure out how to use them. But those raw materials were put here far, far, far anyone ever thought about how to use that. And that's because Hashem understood everything that we're going to need over time. Then it is not surely true that the one who originated the essence of man and his form and his nature and the way he's composed, surely is wise one who knows better than anyone which things are beneficial for the person and which cause him harm. That obviously it's Hashem that knows exactly how we are to be used. And without any doubt, he knows what is good for a person, both in this world that we currently occupy and both in the world to come as well. And we see this because it says in the Pasuk, Kamosha Kasev, as is written in Yeshaya, Ani Hashem Alekecha Malamdecha Lahoyo Medachicha B'derech HaTelech. I am Hashem, your God, who guides you for your benefit, who leads you in the way you should follow. Va'amar, and even if a person suffers and thinks that suffering is not for his benefit, he can be sure that it actually is for his benefit. As it says in Mishlei, Ki es asher Yev Hashem Yechiech Avas Bein Yertzeh. Hashem admonishes the one he loves like a father admonishes his sons, as his son he favors. What it means is when a father tells his child, hey, you can't do that. A father punishes a child or tells his child like in a strict, firm way, you can't do something like that. It's not that the father is trying to be have ill feelings towards the child. It's that the father is trying to correct them. And so sometimes we have to discipline. And that's what he's saying over here. Is that sometimes Hashem has to discipline us, and sometimes it's not as a reprimand for an avera, but sometimes it's for teaching us certain things. And sometimes we have to learn the difficult, hard ways how to do something in order to have the correct way of doing that. And that's the second one that we see from Hashem. And so today, just to recap real quickly, the first one is that Hashem's compassion, that Hashem has full compassion, and that even the compassion that each one of us has towards others is compassion that only comes from Hashem. And just to prove that, we know that sometimes towards the same exact being, we sometimes are compassionate and sometimes we are not. And that's because Hashem puts it in us at certain times in order to be compassionate and certain times not to be compassionate. And the second one is that clearly a manufacturer of sorts knows the best use and care of a product and also knows the detriment to those products. Same is obviously clear when Hashem creates a human being or any other living organism on this world. Hashem knows exactly how it's supposed to be used, what is beneficial and what is harmful towards that one of his creation, and obviously with us human beings. Thank you everyone for joining us here today, and I love you all.